Hi everyone, my name is Owolabi, a cybersecurity professional and an advocate for the protection of security researchers globally. Today I'm speaking with the Election Integrity Foundation here at DEFCON, and I'll be talking about a very urgent and critical topic, which is protecting security researchers globally, talking about the legal steps and the lessons that we can learn, that we can pick up from the global south. At the heart of this discussion is something simple yet powerful, which is security through openness, not silence. So we need to explore why this matters at a time like now. Around the world, security researchers who play a vital role in the safeguarding of our democratic process often face something which is quite troubling. They face arrests, lawsuits, and intimidation instead of being thanked and applauded. Many of these researchers globally have come out to talk about the legal threats that they've been subjected to just because of the discovery that they've made out of their research. Many of these researchers have put in several months and years of work into ensuring that our democratic processes improve than they were before. But when they make the disclosure of these fixed flaws that they've discovered, instead of being thanked and applauded or protected, they rather are subjected to arrests and lawsuits. So the stark reality expose something that is quite troubling, which is the fact that the truth that they expose makes them victim of threats rather than being trusted. So these are the reasons why we need to come together as policymakers, as individuals and citizens globally to create a solid framework that protects security researchers whose sole work is to protect our democratic process. To understand the scope of this problem, we need to consider a few real-life examples. In the United States, a Georgian-based researcher was arrested just because he tried to access public files. Thankfully, after being arrested, these charges were eventually dropped, but this was because of the public prayer that came out as a result of the arrest. This does not reduce the fact that researchers are still being targeted because of the work that they've put in into making our democracy better than they were before. In Nigeria, a researcher was also silenced when he disclosed a vulnerability that he found in the electoral process. Meanwhile, a researcher who exposed a major flaw in the democratic process was also silenced and threatened, and the flaw that he exposed still remains till today unfixed. This flaw definitely would have caused a lot of damage or harm to some part of our democratic process. In India, another researcher who discovered a major flaw in some electoral machines. In India, a researcher who discovered some flaws in some election voting machine was also arrested. Until today, the case remains unsolved. These and many more cases exist scattered around the world, with researchers being threatened and being victims of intimidation just because of the work that they've put in into safeguarding our democratic process. So these are the reasons why we need to come together to find a way to protect people whose sole desire is to make our democratic process better. So why does this matter? Why does this election security research matter globally? You need to understand that elections today are now complex cyber-physical systems where software and hardware meet up to decide the outcomes of elections. So it means a single vulnerability can dis- so it means a single vulnerability can disenfranchise voters and can affect millions of lives. This is why we need to find a way to patch every discovered flaw. We need to constantly update our democratic process to take in we need to constantly update our democratic process to take in ways to fix the flaws that might be discovered. So researchers who serve as our last line of defense often so we know that researchers who are the ones that serve as our last line of defense, rather than being protected, are now victims of intimidations and abuse. As a matter of fact, in many countries, exposing these flaws are treated as espionage or cybercrime. And this is because the legal landscape is quite fragmented with no major solid framework that protects researchers. In some countries, there are strict punishments for people who disclose these vulnerabilities. In others, there are fines for disclosure of vulnerabilities. And in some other countries, the punishment is quite ambiguous. So this means the laws differ by nations. So we need to come together to find a solid framework that protects researchers globally without limiting the scope of their work. So this patchwork of legal frameworks leaves our researchers unprotected and vulnerable to attacks. So let's take a closer look at some specific regions. Let's look at the legal landscape that we have for election security research. So if you look at places like in the US, you have the CFA that talks about the unauthorized access policy. This unauthorized access creates risks when researchers try to access public data. In the US, we need to talk about different policies that hampers the work of researchers. We know about the CFA's work in the US, which talks about the unauthorized access. So this policy creates a risk for researchers who try to access public data. In Nigeria and India, vulnerability disclosures are often treated as sabotage or defamation. So we know that Germany offers partial protections, but fines under GDPR is what limits the work of researchers. So despite the fact that Germany tries as much as they can to still offer a level of protection rather, every fines that have been levied against researchers under the GDPR law makes it difficult for them to proceed with their work. Meanwhile, we have in other nations like China and Russia who enforce strict national security laws, and these laws are what they use to suppress the work of security research. So the uneven and hostile environment that researchers have to work through creates an imbalance in the progress of our democratic process. So we need to find a way to reduce this chilling effect that the uneven legal frameworks has in hampering the vital works of our security researchers globally. So what are the lessons that we can learn from the global south? So we know that emerging democracies, they face quite a number of unique challenges. We know that most of them lack formal channels that are used for responsible vulnerability disclosures. So we need to, and we know that researchers because of this often find themselves quite isolated when they are working. So with no legal counsel, no whistleblower protections across the world that can protect them with the work they are doing, and no support whatsoever to ensure that their work succeeds. So we know that election flaws are frequently labeled as national security secrets. So, and this suppresses transparency and collaboration amongst researchers, and responsible disclosure are not being prioritized. So we know that we know, and what this tells us is the fact that reporting these issues comes at a high personal cost, which includes intimidation, arrest, or worse. So, which includes intimidation, arrest, or worse. And today, culture of distrust still exists between election bodies and independent researchers, and this constantly deepens the divide between them, which doesn't improve or help our democratic processes. To change this, working towards and to ensure that we work towards a global safe harbor for election security research, we need a clear legal immunity for good faith security research. So, regardless of the affiliation of our researchers, we need to provide them protection that ensures their work is protected. So we need structured disclosure protocol. So that means when researchers work, we need a very structured disclosure protocol in which they can share their work through. This, as a matter of fact, ensures that there is no sales of vulnerabilities or flaws that researchers might have discovered. So we need enforceable timelines to ensure the vulnerabilities are addressed properly. So when researchers discover vulnerabilities, we need enforceable timelines that mandate it on them to disclose these flaws that they've discovered properly. So that within the time frame that they've disclosed it, necessary actions can be taken to ensure the flaws are effectively mitigated. So disputes that might come up needs to be reviewed by independent channels, and we need to bring together civil society, technical experts, and election officials. So we need independent review channels that can come to arbitrate disputes that might occur between independent researchers, and laws that we are going to set in place. So we need representatives from civil society, the technical experts, and we need election officials to come together to form this panel. A just panel that can effectively arbitrate the dispute of election research. So we know that cross-border cooperation through mutual recognition agreements is we know that cross-border cooperation through mutual recognition is essential in today's interconnected world. Above all, we need for transparency to come without retaliation. So we need that when election researchers are trying to be transparent, there must be no retaliation against them for the work which they have done. We know that security research is not sabotage, it serves to democracy. Election researchers are not doing this just for them alone, they are doing this to improve and push together our democracy. So while this their work continue, we need to support them with protection. We need to support them with effective framework that ensures that their work is appreciated and necessary actions are taken based on the recommendations of their work. We need to talk about the benefits of Safe Harbor. So why exactly is Safe Harbor so important? With Safe Harbor, we know that ethical disclosures will increase. So when researchers work and they find vulnerabilities or flaws within a system, there will be ethical disclosure because they know they are no more living in fear of being targeted with lawsuits or otherwise. And with this, we have cases where we know that ethical disclosures will ensure that fixes happen immediately they are disclosed. With this framework that will protect researchers, public trust will grow stronger. This framework also fosters global cooperation and keeps our skilled researchers engaged and motivated instead of being discouraged by the targets that different laws presently place on their backs. We know that a safe harbor that protects them will keep our researchers quite motivated and always engaged. So every researcher will know that their work is being valued and important for the progress of our democracy. So without safe harbor, researchers will still keep living in fears. With the growth of the safe harbor framework, we know that public confidence will improve. Simply put, we can just say it's as the protection of the truth tellers would protect our voting itself. So that means voters in elections would not live in fear of being disenfranchised by technological advancement or the flaws that exist within different technologies that are now being used in electoral processes. So this is why it is important for us to protect our researchers. This is why we need to protect our last line of defense in democracy. So this is a call to actions. This is a call to protect our guardians of democracy. So as much as our researchers are trying to protect our democracy, we need to protect them. Protecting them in turn protects our democracy. So the message here is clear. Government needs to create safe harbor laws that protect our researchers. We must protect those who protect democracy. We need to create an enabling environment for research to grow. NGOs and legal clinics need to come together and offer legal defense and public advocacy for researchers who might be targeted and who might become victims of legal threats, arrest, or intimidation. So the civil society and the citizens need to also demand transparency and support ethical disclosure of security research. As hackers and researchers, we need to keep engaging in good faith. As researchers globally, it is our responsibility to ensure that our engagement are done ethically and in good faith for good causes. Researchers need to understand this. As a researcher here and in everywhere around the world, we need to know that we are not alone. We need to have a sense of being part of something bigger than us. We need to understand that election security is a shared responsibility. It includes the researchers, it includes the policymakers, and it includes the citizens. Together, we need to come together to create a safe harbor for researchers to work. Protecting them once again protects our democracy. Protecting our democracy advances our community and society and our global society. Thank you for your time and attention. Election security still remains a global challenge that requires collaboration between everyone. It's an all-inclusive project. It includes the researchers, the policymakers, and the citizens. So we need to come together to make this work. So if this talk resonates with you, I invite you to join me on this cause of change. I'm open to collaborating on research, advocacy, or policy work in this space, and I believe with the effort of you and I, we can make this space a safe haven for global researchers. Our security is important, and this is why the security of researchers is important. Let's keep this vital conversation going, and let's continue protecting those who safeguard democracy. Thank you very much.